The microphone is working. And inshallah, our video connection will be working also very shortly. Assalamu alaikum. Hamda, welcome. Merhaba, ahlan wa sahlan. For the session, Water is Life, session 3A, rooms 12 to 14. So hopefully you're in the right session, inshallah, and hopefully we're in the right session, and we'll try to move things forward. My name is Saffet Catovic. I'm the moderator for this session. When I'm not at the ISNA convention in Chicago, I have various hats, and one of the other hats I have here at this convention, you'll see me in my Boy Scoutmaster's uniform. But outside of this convention, I serve as the Imam and Muslim chaplain at Drew University in Madison, New Jersey. And I'm also on ISNA's Green Mosque Task Force. And I'm going to make a plug right now because I'm probably going to forget about it later. It is a task force that was set up by the Masjid Development Committee of ISNA to work on greening our mosques, and we do have a booklet called the Green Masjid Project booklet. It's available in the registration area, the main area registration. So please do so. It's also available on the ISNA website. Pick it up and see some of the activities that ISNA's Green Mosque Task Force has been involved in, including launching of the National Greening Our Ramadan Initiative. And we'll have a chance maybe to talk about that a little bit later. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce the session formally. The verse that is quoted is the end of the verse of Surah Al-30, the verse number 30. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Ba'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem, وَجَعَلْنَا مِنَ الْمَاءِ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ حَيٍّ." And He made every living thing from water. Water, dear brothers and sisters, its purposes, usages, and in particular the principles of water conservation are contained throughout Islam's teachings as found in its primary source texts of the Holy Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet. Both of these, as you know, are considered as legally binding precedents upon the believers. Water is a major theme in Islamic cosmology and iconography, as well as a recurrent topic in liturgy and daily life. Each of the Anbiya and the Rasuls, the prophets and messengers, mentioned by name in the Holy Quran from Adam to Muhammad, including Nuh, Ibrahim, Musa, Isa, and the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, have an intimate story or stories connected with water. This is not surprising, since Islam and its antecedents is a religion that is oriented in and around the Arabian Peninsula, a desert area, and it's spread mainly to other arid and semi-arid territories. Scarcity has always influenced and continues to influence the perception of water by Muslims, and it has accordingly shaped and continues to shape their behaviors and customs. Given this reality, coupled with the fact that in general religion and religious teaching still exert significant influence on Muslims and in Muslim society, developing religion-based awareness campaigns and effective water conservation and management programs is a critical component in strategies to develop effective policies and campaigns for the conservation of water resources. Imams, religious leaders, educators, khatibs, environmental activists, and other opinion makers need to become conversant and trained to convey the messages of water appreciation and conservation. Today, we are very honored and blessed to have two distinguished speakers who will be presenting to us on this subject. Sister Ameena Jandali will be our first presenter. She hails from California, and I'm sort of in a difficult position because I feel a little bit outnumbered here. I'm the Easterner, meaning I'm from Jersey, And we have two Westerners here. We have Sister Ameena and Imam Zaid. I know you don't think they're Westerners, but they're Westerners, meaning from the West Coast, from California. But in any case, we are very blessed with the fact and with the difficulty of being an Easterner introducing Westerners. I'm going to go ahead and try my best. Sister Ameena Jandali is a founding member, and she is not new to Muslim work and activism at both a regional, local, and national level. She is the founding member and serves as the content director of the Islamic Networks groups, the ING, where she co-designs and develops ING's educational presentations and cultural competency seminars. Through ING, Sister Ameena and her team have delivered hundreds of presentations in schools and colleges and universities and various interfaith and other religious institutions and venues on Islam and related subjects. And one of the subjects that is dear to her heart that she has written on and spoken on quite extensively is the area of Islam and the environment. I'd like to ask Sister Ameena Jandali to present. Oh, by the way, as I mentioned to Sister Ameena Jandali, one of the ways that you recognize the expertise of this panel with regard to the environment is we're having technological difficulties. If someone says they're an expert on the environment and everything runs smooth with technology, you have to begin to question their expertise. Alhamdulillah. Sister, here, you can, if you don't mind, you can hold this one.
So I must be really dedicated to the environment today because nothing's working, but mashallah, alhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Jazakumullah khair for joining us for this session, and I'm really honored to be sharing the panel and the stage with Imam Zaid, a longtime activist in many fields, but certainly as West Coastians, as San Francisco Bay Area folks, that is something that's very near and dear to our hearts. And so it's a privilege to talk with him and to share just some of our concerns around Muslims and the environment, Islam and the environment. So I'm going to go beyond just speaking about water, which is an important component, but I'm going to talk more broadly about how Islam, the Quran, the Hadith look at the environment and how we as Muslims are obligated to respond to that obligation. Can you see the PowerPoint? Yay, alhamdulillah. Technology is great when it works. So I just want to highlight some general principles, both from the Quran and the Hadith, that we can use kind of as a foundation for talking about the environment. Because I would say for most Muslims, they don't really view the environment as part of their religious obligations, the way that they might look at a certain way of dressing, a certain way of eating, obviously ibadah, praying, fasting, etc. And so what we'd really like to do is to move the needle on that so that we can expand our worldview of what Islam really obliges us to do as Muslims to also encompass this very important responsibility. So this verse talks about the concept of Ameena, which I was actually recently talking about this to a group of Jews who were talking about the environment in Judaism, and they were really fascinated by this concept that as human beings, we accepted this trust that other aspects of creation refrained from. Here it talks about the earth and the mountains, and the fact that they were frightened by this obligation, and yet human beings accepted it. They rushed forward to accept it, thinking that maybe in their arrogance that they were up to it, and this verse reflects the fact that perhaps they were not fully aware of the level of responsibility. They proved to be benighted in ignorance. So sometimes people accept something they're not fully in comprehension of, and in doing so, they don't live up to that responsibility. The other side of Ameena is the concept of khilafah, or vicegerency, that as the keepers, as those responsible for this earth, that is our domain. Just like if any of you have used Airbnb before, when you get possession of those keys, you are the vicegerent, you're the khalifa for that time period, whether it's a few days or a week of that domain. And as such, there are obvious responsibilities that are entailed in your agreement You're going to, leave things the way you found them. You're not going to break anything. You're going to leave it clean, right? You're not going to go there and leave it in a condition worse than when you first went there, because then there's going to be consequences. And so that's the same concept that we should keep in mind when we think about vicegerency on this earth. This earth is our home. It's our abode. And with that comes responsibilities that are quite serious. And this is reflected in a prophetic saying, a hadith, that the world is green and beautiful, and Allah has appointed you as stewards over it. So stewardship, khilafah, vicegerency, very weighty terms that should make all of us really feel that it is an Islamic obligation to live up to these responsibilities. Throughout the Quran, one also finds numerous ayat that refer to the natural world and the bounty that God has created as a favor to human beings. And in this particular verse, the concept of balance, that the entirety of this world is created in a balance, and that if you upset that balance, whether we're talking about business, or we're talking about ecosystems, or we're talking about the general environment, there are going to be consequences of that, and that by denying the rights of creation, that is one of the ways that one can deny the favors of Allah, which is the refrain of this particular chapter. Also throughout the Quran, there are verses that point to creation, that point to nature, that point to this universe as signs of Allah, ayatullah, that this is another way of glorifying God. Indeed, we glorify God through prayer and tasbih, but going out and looking at nature and really pondering the grandness of something as small as a flower. I always say, how can someone who looks at a flower and smells that scent be an atheist? Because were there not a purpose behind that flower which can only be appreciated by a human being, it could not be an accident. A flower cannot be an accident. It's too sublime. And the Quran points this out in so many very minute and very on-point details. We know there's no conflict. There has never been that conflict between science and religion, because Islam and the Quran point to science as proof of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Also, and this is in a bit of a contrast, many of these ideas are a bit of a contrast with biblical interpretations that basically open the door to, the world is yours to just take. And there are certainly aspects of it in the Quran where these natural resources are assigned as a bounty for humans to use and to appreciate it, and that is reflected in the words, subjected for all things in the heavens and on earth, and has made bounties flow to you in exceeding measure, the seen and unseen. So there's no denying that part of Allah's favor to human beings is that He has created these bounties in nature for use by human beings, and He calls human beings to look at this again in gratitude and in recognition of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has done for His creation. And among these verses is what was mentioned before, the miraculous reality that every living thing is made from water. A scientific discovery that could not have been known to scientists 1,400 years ago, and that really reflects the reality that this is a God-given book. For those who are not familiar with Islam, they often look at it as a religion that is insensitive to others, and they are shocked to learn that there are so many ahadith and Quranic verses that actually address the treatment of plants and animals. And we know this famous saying that even if you are planting a tree on the Day of Judgment and the Day of Judgment comes, you should continue doing that. And there are also so many prophetic sayings about kindness to animals, and even the smallest of animals, such as ants, not destroying their habitat. There are also numerous injunctions against waste, or israf, as in both of these verses, again acknowledging that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves to see His bounty and has provided this bounty for human enjoyment, but that we should not go to the excess and waste. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this, but we all came out of Ramadan, We enjoyed, alhamdulillah, Tarawih, and we enjoyed our iftars. But it made me extremely sad to see that in a month when we are really being taught the lessons of the value of food and the blessings of food, how just really comfortable many Muslims felt with taking that food and throwing it in the garbage can. And I think we really don't take these two verses seriously enough. I have lived in countries like Turkey where, for instance, they will not put bread on the ground. They will actually put it on a wall so that another creature, a bird or insects, can eat of that bounty. And yet, for some reason, we become very comfortable just dumping that in the garbage. And there's numerous teachings around moderation, conservation, and in condemnation of waste and extravagance. In fact, there's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that even if you are washing at a river, and of course, if you're washing in a river, that river is going to continue to flow, and it's not going to be diminished. Even in that situation, you should conserve when you're making wudu, let alone how we make wudu, full tap. Now, of course, me and Imam Zaid come from California, where we just came out of one of the worst droughts in recent history, and so it was a lesson that we shouldn't take these things for granted. And unfortunately, as human beings, once the drought is lifted, people kind of go back to these bad habits. We also know that we are described in the Quran as the moderate or the middle nation, and that moderation is encouraged in all aspects of life, including religious practice, including eating. The famous hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that when you eat, you should fill your stomach 1/3 with food, 1/3 with drink, and keep 1/3 empty, which would go far in preventing diabetes and some of the other ills that are really wreaking havoc on our healthcare system. And so things are really connected. There's a prophetic saying or hadith that you should not do harm nor reciprocate harm, and that should really be something that we frame and put in our living room, and when we go out the door, we should really think about, what is my footprint today? What have I done to the earth today that will bear witness long after I'm gone? How many bags of garbage are left? And you could sit and go over a lifetime of how many garbage bags are going to be left behind when you are put in your grave, and think about the responsibility, not only, of course, to our family and ourselves, but to the entire world. And so walking lightly on earth, considering the effects of our actions, and really working to end what has become the devastation of our earth. And this is, subhanAllah, a very powerful hadith that when there was an oil spill some 10 years ago really came to my mind, that this devastation of the home that we were given as an Ameena has been at the very hands of the people who were given that trust. And so we see this devastation at multiple levels, obviously with the pollution of air, land, the depletion of the ozone layer, disruption of ecosystems, extinction of entire species, dissemination of world's forests in the name of greed, depletion of fertile lands because people are overusing them, obviously the spread of toxic chemicals and hazardous wastes, and then of course, in recent times, the effects of global warming and climate change that have now reached devastating levels. We're seeing that with melting ice caps, rising sea levels that threaten both coasts, that threaten entire communities. Droughts, we're seeing droughts in places like California, as well as extreme weather that brings flooding and hurricanes. There's no more denying the impact of climate change that is wreaking havoc in the billions of dollars. And so perhaps the very life on earth is at risk, but as Muslims, we believe that it's never too late to change the situation, and if not for ourselves, for our children and grandchildren. So I wanted to go through just a few ways that we can kind of rethink our life on this earth and the kind of lifestyle that we all engage in, how we live, where we live, what we eat, what we drink, what we wear, what we buy, how much we buy. And ultimately, all of this is really a reflection of what is our purpose on earth, which is ultimately to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to serve as vicegerents. And so any kind of change can be legislated, obviously, at a high level, and that is effective. But any successful change really begins at a grassroots level. And if it's effective, it is based on moral and ethical principles. It may be gradual, but it needs to be impactful. And of course, no true change can happen without some kind of pain. And so, inshallah, these are a few simple steps to help preserve the environment. And beginning right here at this conference, and I probably am guilty of the first one, pack lightly. Now, there is an incentive for all of us to pack lightly because the airlines are doing something very smart. They're charging, except for Southwest, for extra luggage, and this is to really preserve the expenditure of oil, but it also is an environmental action. We all need to make wudu. There are ways to make wudu where you conserve water, just keep the tap running lightly. And one thing I do that, it sounds really bizarre, but I've been doing this for many years, and it really is, it's useful, and it saves paper. Whenever I dry my hands with paper, I take that piece of paper and I put it back in my purse. And lo and behold, when my son needs a Kleenex to wipe his nose, I reach in and it's dried off and he can use it. So whatever ways you can do to reduce the use of towels, the use of disposable utensils. If you calculate how many disposable utensils you're going to be using throughout this conference, you could just take this plastic cup, write your name on it, thank you, Jazakallah khair, and put in your bag, or be smart like our moderator and bring your own water bottle. And think of, again, how many paper cups, how many plastic cups are you saving over a period of 4 days? When you leave your hotel room, be sure to turn off your lights, your AC, which, wastes far more energy even than lights. You're in a hotel, and yes, coming from California, yay, we can take that long shower, right? But you're still using resources that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. Usually they have the option in hotels to not change your linen and towels. In my hotel it said if it's on the ground we'll change it, if it's on the rack we won't. Just because you're staying at a hotel, you are still using resources even though you're not paying for them. I had worked many years ago with ISNA to try to have recycling bins. I'm not quite sure how that's looking, but make an effort. Take that bottle and put it in the recycling bin. It's not that much effort, and the reward is something you'll actually feel once you get used to doing this. I've also talked to ISNA about recycling name tags, so inshallah at the last session they are going to be passing around a bucket, and you can put your recycling badge, you can put your badge back into it. In your mosque or organization, if you're in a leadership position, work on and discuss conserving electricity, talk to people attending the mosque about conserving water when they make wudu. Again, have those recycling bins on the premises for people to actually get used to using. And it's a great youth activity where they can actually sell those bottle and cans and make money, so they're learning while they're earning money. Use paper or biodegradable utensils. This is probably my biggest pet peeve. I have never been to a masjid where it is totally and utterly styrofoam free. And every time I ask people why they're using styrofoam, they always say, oh, somebody else bought it. So if it needs to be written into your masjid policy that we will not ever, under any circumstances, even if we are out of paper, buy styrofoam, let it be. Styrofoam does not degrade. It stays in the ground or it stays in the garbage, in the landfill for years, if not centuries. It's also toxic in terms of our food. And yes, it holds those curries in, and it's cheaper, but we really need to take styrofoam out of our life and out of our masajid. And this could be part of green guidelines that masajid could really adopt and really encourage through education as well as through modeling. In order to really have an effective recycling and take it a step further, in California we have composting program, you have to have people at the structural organizational level to put all of this in place. And again, I was talking about Ramadan. This is a flyer I put together a couple of years ago about a green Ramadan that includes some of these suggestions, including when serving the food, making sure that you're serving small portions and encouraging people to take home any extra food so that you're not filling now your garbage cans with food waste that actually contributes to global warming because of the gases that are released. Also, as we talked about, it is haram, I believe, to really, without any excuse, throw away food that you can take home and eat the next day, and it really goes against our Islamic teachings. And I know this is something I've posted on Facebook about it. Why are our masajids still comfortable every night having iftar and seeing these bags and bags and bags of styrofoam, paper, plastic, and this is how we spend our Ramadan. What we would want to see is a garbage-free, a waste-free Ramadan. We've worked on it at Lighthouse Mosque for the last 3 years, I think I've stood by the compost. We actually, in California, and I don't know how much this is across the nation, you can take paper products and you can put them in your compost bin. You can also buy utensils that are compostable, and so you can put that all in the compost bin and you will have a waste-free iftar. Even better, people can bring their own utensils. I know this is something at Lighthouse Mosque that they began many years ago, and sometimes people forget their utensils. You can have utensils on hand, so that's even better, where you have nothing left, not even compost. And then, of course, many things people can do in the mosque have to do with the topic we're discussing, which is water. Bring your own water bottle so that after the salah, you're not left with a whole room full of water bottles that are unfortunately then thrown in the garbage. So that's an entire booklet, and I don't know, you may want to tell them where they can get that booklet and how they can organize their own green Ramadan. And very quickly, in your homes, doing the same thing, conserving water. These are some of the ways that you can do it through checking for leaks, running your dishwashers and washing machines only when full, not leaving water running when brushing your teeth, taking shorter showers, and installing shower heads that save water. Here in California, it's actually against the law, or it has been against the law, to use the hose to clean the sidewalk because of the drought, and that's something that we should follow, throughout the country. They now have different types of energy-efficient light bulbs. I don't like the ones with mercury, but they now have ones that do not have mercury. Obviously, something we teach our children: turn off the lights when you leave the room, unplug electric devices when you're not using them. Lower your thermostat just by 2 degrees makes a huge difference. Instead of turning up the heater, put on a sweater. And when you're washing, use cold or warm instead of hot. Shorter showers, again, both for water and energy conservation. Wash your clothes when they're actually dirty. That sounds funny, but it's, many people just put their clothes in the laundry at the end of the day. And, people who grew up overseas, they would not wash their clothes until they'd worn them for maybe a week. So what does it mean to be dirty? We need to really rethink how we look at what that means. If you live in sunny climates, using a clothesline. Now most appliances are energy efficient. Again, running dishwashers when they're full. Lowering the thermostat on your refrigerator. Insulate your water heater will lower, again, the amount of energy used. Insulating your home will also help in many ways, and you can actually get an energy audit. In terms of actual carbon emissions when commuting, there are so many other ways of getting around, but we're just so used to getting in our car. And when getting in that car, driving responsibly. I know people who will literally drive for 1 hour just to go eat at a restaurant. If we're thinking of our carbon footprint, we probably would rethink how often we want to do that. Other small tips like avoid idling the car. Observing the speed limit has actually been shown to reduce energy consumption, keeping your car, your tires in good condition. And obviously thinking about where we work with relation to where we live. The whole way that our cities have been formed over the last few decades are not really in line with conserving energy because we live in the suburbs, which could be a whole hour away from our work. Really rethinking, what kind of a lifestyle we are setting ourselves up for. And then, of course, this is something our children learn in schools, the 3 R's: recycle, reduce, reuse. Anything that is recyclable should be recycled, and there's specific rules for electronics. Avoiding products with a lot of packagings. One of my favorite stores is Trader Joe's, but if you look at the way that they package their products, they have way too much packaging. And if you think of the way that your parents used to buy things, they would go to the local bazaar and fill up a sack with beans, and they would avoid all of that packaging. So if that's at all possible in the area that you live, avoiding buying packaged goods and purchasing bottled water when it's not necessary. If you think about bottled water and the way that it is packaged, the way that one of the major issues in California is that Nestle has been taking water out of a certain source for years illegally at the same time that we're suffering from a drought. And these water bottle companies do this across the world. They then ship this water, putting in all of the energy, using water bottles made out of plastic, which is leaching into the water. You don't really want to be drinking that water anyway because it becomes toxic. And this is a multi-billion-dollar industry. People believe that water is somehow better than what they get out of their tap, when most of the time it is absolutely not. Reuse your plastic and paper bags. Even better, use your own bags. And If your kids aren't particular about their paper products, you can buy all sorts of recycled paper products now. Biodegradable utensils are now available. And really trying to avoid any materials that are non-recyclable, in particular, like I said, styrofoam. And if you do have the ability to compost, you can just take your kitchen waste and put it in your agricultural waste. And literally, my garbage can is the smallest of 3 cans. There's the recycling bin, the compost yard waste, and then I have a very small garbage can. There are people who literally have no waste at all at the end of the week because they're basically avoiding buying anything that is not recyclable or compostable. What we choose to eat also has a great impact on our environment. Eating organically, which is avoiding a lot of the pesticides and the other toxics that are put into our soil, into our atmosphere. Buying locally grown foods, which is actually something that is mentioned in the Quran. We don't always have to have watermelon throughout the year that is shipped up from Mexico and all of the energy spent to ship it up here. Buying fresh foods instead of frozen, not only more nutritious, but also avoiding, again, that expenditure of energy. If you have local farmers markets in your area, really supporting those. Or better, grow your own vegetables. They taste better, they're healthier, a lot of fun with the kids. Eat less meat. There's a prophetic saying that you shouldn't make your stomach a graveyard, which means avoiding, eating too much meat. Meat used to be a luxury. It wasn't a staple for every meal every day of the week, and yet we find that many of our diets really focus on meat, and that's an aspect of global warming that many people don't know about, that the methane gas put out by these animals, livestock, actually contribute as much or even more than our fossil fuels. And the fact that about 40% of our food waste ends up in landfill, that's about half of the food that we grow or buy. What can we do in our houses, in our communities to really put an end to food waste? Because we know that there are billions of people in the world who are not eating enough, who are literally starving, and this is really not the idea of appreciation of Allah's bounty. And then lastly, avoiding any toxic chemicals. There's so many replacements now, whether it's dishwashing detergent, whether it's soap to use in your washing machine, and really trying to avoid any of the pesticides or herbal or things that are used in the garden, because those are, again, going into our ecosystem. They're affecting our water, they're affecting our soil, and they're affecting our children. The concept that less is more, we've been led a lie that, after 9/11, President Bush told us to go out and shop. We all get this adrenaline rush when we buy a new product. We take it home, we put it in the closet, and then eventually we give it away because we just have too much. So avoiding purchasing things that we don't really need, because all of them, whether they cost a lot or a little, are using energy and resources. If you, buy a new thing, then recycle or give away what you're not using. Many people are now shopping for secondhand items. That saves, again, the whole cycle of resources, and really rethinking the way we live. The Prophet ﷺ modeled a simple life. We know that things do not make us happy, and the more consciously we live, the more we can bring ourselves in line with a lifestyle and a consciousness that we are here as servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is our home. We need to take care of our home, so we need to tread lightly and leave a light footprint. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
Jazakallah khair, Sister Ameena, for comprehensive presentation and giving us a lot of very practical hands-on things that we can put into practice to make our lifestyles more eco-friendly and more in keeping with the prophetic example. I'd like to ask, she mentioned, so I'm going to mention it again, some of you came a little bit late. ISNA has what's called the Green Mosque Task Force. I serve as a member of it, and Green Ramadan initiatives have been initiated around the country in different communities like Sister Ameena's and others. Here in Jersey, we had also the Green Muslims of New Jersey, Green Muslims of DC, the Green Muslims of Wisconsin. So a lot of different grassroots efforts have worked towards greening mosques. But alhamdulillah, 3 years ago, ISNA took it to the national level and encouraged mosques to adapt certain practices during the month of Ramadan in particular, under the theme when less is more, to, for example, eliminate styrofoam implement programs in which recycling is part and parcel of the masjid policy with regard to waste removal and so on and so forth. Specific things that they asked masjids to pledge to do. And in 2015, if I remember correctly, there were 37 masjids that formally registered in 22 states to be a part of that program. Many masjids did not register, although they are implementing those policies on their own. This past year, the number has exceeded 50, and it is in 40 states across the United States. So 40 states, 50. And once again, that's not including the masjids who did not necessarily formally register yet are trying to implement that. That being said, while we were very happy to hear that, Dr. Ihsan Bagbi, who's a member of our Green Mosque Task Force, reminds us that there's over 2,000 masjids in the United States. So while we are moving in the direction going forward, when you think about the actual numbers, we still have a long way to go. So we thank Sister Ameena for pointing out practical ways in which our communities, our homes can become more eco-friendly. Now I'd like to ask Imam Zaid Shakir to present to us. Okay. We will have hopefully time for questions and answers at the end. Our brother, volunteer, what's your name, brother? Osman will be walking around, so if you want to write it down, please do write it down on the card so you don't forget it. We'll try to answer them. The speakers will try to answer them. Specifically, if you have a question to a particular speaker, write the name of the speaker. If it's just a general question, write the general. But we also take questions from the floor as well, but we'll look to those at the end of the session. And Imam Zaid doesn't need much of an introduction, but I'm going to just mention 2 or 3 things about him. You can read the details of his biography. I've had the distinct honor to know him, I think, since the early 80s. Where he was one of the key founders of a masjid in our neighborhood at Rutgers University, Masjid al-Huda. And then later on, he moved on to Connecticut. He spent time studying abroad in Egypt, specializing in Arabic language, and later on in his career, studying under various scholars of international renown in Syria. And he is, as you know, the co-founder of Zaytuna University and Zaytuna College, and we are very honored to have him here today. Even though he's a Westerner, we welcome him to this central part of the United States of America. So.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah rabbil alameen, wassalatu wassalam ala sayyidil mursaleen, Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam tasliman kathira. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Listen, today I'm representing for the East Coast. It's Connecticut and New Jersey. I'm representing for Rutgers University, and I'm representing for Connecticut. And just to make Saffet more comfortable, Ameena, he's just sending me west, shipping me out. Subhanallah. Like I'm gonna go out to California, Hakuna Matata, for the rest of my days. Subhanallah. But it's a great honor to be here. And I've known Saffet, as he said, for a long time. And I've been blessed to have the opportunity to work with him on the Green Muslim projects and larger projects. And due to his intervention and connections, we were able to address the climate change march in New York City, where I would say at least 1 million people. I mean, we came around 9 in the morning and the streets were filled, and then we left at 5 or so, and people were still coming in. And the people were down on Wall Street all the way up to 65th or so, and then across Midtown. I mean, it was awesome. Seriously. And I had also the opportunity to write the Muslim response to the Pope's ecological encyclical, and that was also due to the work and the guidance and intervention of Saffet. So Catholics all over the English-speaking world are studying various responses from different faith communities to the historic encyclical on the environment and climate change by Pope Francis, and I had the opportunity to write the Muslim response to that. So in any case, we as Muslims should be very cognizant of the responsibility that we have to this earth. As Sister Ameena mentioned, Allah Ta'ala has made us His Khalifa. وَإِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً. I'm going to place in the earth a vicegerent, a custodian of sorts. And so the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah has extended to us, we have a responsibility to extend that to other creatures. And this is an idea that runs counter to major religious movements in this country right now. And so I think as Muslims, we have and if you want to really, I'm going to recommend a few books during this session. One book I highly recommend for a number of reasons is Arlie Hochschild, Strangers in Their Own Land. She goes to the heart of Tea Party Company in southwestern Louisiana, one of the most ecologically devastated regions in this country, the heart of petrochemical, plastics, industries, and the ecological devastation is unfathomable. But the way that is justified religiously is very interesting. I think it behooves all of us to understand that, because this is the thought that's informing the environmental project of our current administration in Washington, D.C., of the Trump administration. And so when you put someone who's dedicated their life to destroying ecological protection over the Ecological Protection Agency, etc., there is an underlying philosophy behind that. And as Muslims, it behooves us, and as Americans, to understand it so we can begin to push back in an informed and systematic way. So in any case, we have a responsibility as the vicegerent. Our Prophet ﷺ were reminded time and time again, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. We've only sent you as a mercy to all the worlds. And so we are the followers of the Prophet ﷺ, who's a mercy to all the worlds. And one meaning of al-alameen is the world of humans, the world of the insects, the world of the animals, the world of the plants. And to be merciful unto them, we have to work for their protection and their preservation. And they're disappearing rapidly. They're disappearing very rapidly. But we have a chance to reverse the damage. We have a chance to reverse the damage. Allah Ta'ala mentions in the Quran again, ظهر الفساد في البحر والبحر بما كسبت أيدي الناس ليذيقهم بعد الذي عملوا لعلهم يرجعون. That corruption has appeared in the land and the sea. And one meaning of that corruption, Ibn Abbas says, in the sea is the disappearance of the fish. And we know that upwards to 90% of our fish species are threatened with extinction right now if we don't do something. That's the food many people rely on in coastal areas for their protein. That's the biological diversity that beautifies our earth. It's going to go, but we had la'allahum, Allah gives us a taste of that damage in order that we return to the path of right guidance. And the path of right guidance includes the path of ecological stewardship. Those who can read Arabic, I don't know if it's been translated into English. There's a book by Imam Subqi called Mu'id al-Ni'am, Mubid al-Niqam. So perpetuating the blessings and distancing, driving away the things that will be a source of remorse. It's a book of the Hisbah and the guarding the public space. And in there are all sorts of insightful ways that Muslims considered ecological stewardship and protection. Just give a small example of the sense of responsibility that our forebears had for life itself. And it's a shame to see our Muslim cities today, which are generally ecological disaster zones. But the instructions to, if you've been to Morocco, some of you, they still have walls around most of the city, the old walls, and they're covered with stucco. And so the instruction to the person stuccoing the walls was you have to inspect the walls before you plaster them over to make sure that no birds have made their nest in the wall, and you plaster them in and kill them, and then the government bears that responsibility. This is the level of ecological consciousness that was cultivated by those who preceded us. So it's very important for us. One of the themes of this particular session, وَجَعَلْنَا مِنَ الْمَاءِ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ حَيٍّ. We've made from water every living thing. And we know from our legal system, from the maqasid al-sharia, the overarching objectives of our sharia, first is the preservation of religion. After that is the preservation of life. And so if we don't work for the protection and the preservation of water, symbolic of our environment at large, there is no life. There's no animal life, there's no plant life, there's no human life. I recently saw, I don't watch television generally, except when I maybe go to people's houses and it's on. I got rid of my television in 1987. I read a book by Jerry Mander. That's Sally's brother. Sally Mander. Okay. No, I don't know if Jerry has a sister named Sally. Anyway, he wrote a book called 4 Arguments for the Elimination of Television. So I read the book and I eliminated my television. But once in a while, I get a peek here and there. But recently, I don't know where I was. I was at my mother-in-law's. So she's sick, so we've been out there trying to take care of her. She watches television, so I can't go in her house. Mom, turn the television off. Astaghfirullah. So it was saying there's a crab in China. And they said this crab survived 5 ecological extinction epochs. Like 5 eras where like the dinosaurs it's prehistoric. The dinosaurs were wiped out. This form of life was wiped. This crab survived and said now there's a challenge that it can't survive. Pollution owing to the massive unregulated industrializing of China. And so the crab is disappearing because we are forced. The crab can't survive. And that's why we're encouraged to be the vicegerent, because we have this destructive potential as human beings. And if we don't rein it in by cultivating a higher consciousness and a higher concern for life, one of the maqasid of Sharia, hifdhul hayat, preserving life, then we're derelict in our duty as Muslims. And we're answerable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as the one instructing the rulers that if that one bird gets plastered in and dies, you're responsible before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So may Allah give us tawfiq in that regard. We are encouraged not to be wasteful. Allah ta'ala reminds us, إِنَّ الْمُبَذِّرِينَ كَانُوا إِخْوَانَ الشَّيَاطِينَ وَكَانَ الشَّيْطَانُ لِرَبِّهِ كَفُورًا. That those who are wasteful are brothers of the Satans. Because what does Satan encourage? Satan encourages unrestrained action. So a believer is restrained in our actions. Ad-dunya sijnul mu'min wa jannatul kafir. So when you're in prison, your actions are constrained. You can't do what you want, when you want, how you want. You do what the warden wants, when the warden wants, how the warden wants it. You can want a strawberry shortcake with cream on top and a cherry. You're going to get what's called jailhouse cake. It's in these big flat pans. It's about half an inch high. You cut it in squares. That's your cake. So you're not going to be able to have your cake and eat it too. And a believer in this world does not have his or her cake and eat it too. We do what Allah wants us to do. And this is one of the big threats of kind of the secularizing of the Muslim mind, where people think, I do whatever I want to do, and then I make Islam conform to that. No, we say Islam is submission to the will of God. So the wasters are called the brethren, the sisters of Satan. And Satan was rebellious before his Lord. وَكَانَ الشَّيْطَانُ لِرَبِّهِ كَفُورًا. We want to submit to our Lord. We want to be that Khalifa. We want to be that vicegerent. We want to be that person. The actions, I have a couple minutes left here. Number one, we need to make lifestyle changes. And this is what Islam demands of us. See, we can get into a protest mentality. You protest everything, but you don't do anything that makes a significant change. That's why a lot of activists burn out. They protest, 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 nothing changes. So if you see people out in the streets now, no, down with Trump, down with Trump. Well, you can say down with Trump all you want, but if you're not organizing to stop the voter suppression that's going to occur in 2018, if you're not organizing to get people out to vote in 2018, and Democrats generally don't vote in midterm elections, then down with Trump's not going to do anything to change anything. We Muslims are people of action. And so we don't want to just talk about the environment, we want to act, and we want to make commitments. Everyone should commit to bringing a water can to ISNA next year, so we don't create a ton of plastic waste. And I'll recommend another book. I don't want to take your time explaining, breaking down how plastic bottles are made and where they go. But I want all of you to order Annie Leonard's, and to do it right now, after this session is over, with your phone, because you have the Amazon app, or you just go to your Google and Google Amazon.com, and it will say books, and you click books, and you put in Annie Leonard, like Sugar Ray Leonard, Annie Leonard, The Story of Stuff. The Story of Stuff, and read about how plastic is made. Only buy recycled gold. If you want gold, buy recycled gold. Because as gold becomes more and more scarce, you know how they make gold now? They get 20 tons of gold ore and drench it in arsenic. And that leaches out the gold. And from that 20 tons, you get an ounce of gold. And then you take the arsenic sludge and you either just leave it in piles next to the mines where the rain releaches it in the groundwater, like is happening in South Africa, or you dump it in the ocean. But you can buy recycled gold, buy recycled clothing. In Connecticut, I spent the last few summers there. There's a store, I don't know if it's nationwide, so we have youngsters that buy clothes for. It's called Once Upon a Child. There's one in Bristol, Connecticut. There's one in Weathersfield, Connecticut. Once Upon a Child. Recycled, it's like new, but these clothes are recycled. We used to have hand-me-downs. So if you had 3 or 4 boys, the fourth boy is wearing what the first boy wore. You call it hand-me-downs. Now we're too proud. وَكَانَ الشَّيْطَانُ لِرَبِّهِ كَفُورًا. So that's a shaitanic characteristic. Oh, I don't want my child wearing new clothes. What are you, some kind of shaitan? Seriously, what's the character? أَبَى وَاسْتَكْبَرَ وَكَانَ مِنَ الْكَافِرِينَ. So you rather have your child to feed this monstrous industry that's taking so many resources from the earth so that your children's children won't have an earth. So your children won't wear recycled clothes. At the price of what? Your children's future. We have to think. And so water, get your water. Unless you're traveling overseas and the water's bad, you should drink tap water, because you know what? Most of bottled water is tap water anyway. The bottled water industry is totally unregulated. And when they test it, most of it is worse than what comes out of your tap anyway. They say bottled at the source, the tap. That's the truth, folks. And take cold showers. It's actually healthy for you. Yeah, I take cold showers. Winter, this is one of the rare times my wife isn't with me. She's taking care of her mother. Her priorities are straight. kick me to the curb. Boom, gotta take care of my. Take cold showers. It's healthier if it builds up your immune system. You won't get colds in the winter. I know that sounds like, what do they call it, oxymoronic or something. So in any case, and then I want to just emphasize this one, and I'm over. I'm done. You don't need a second note. As Sister Ameena said, eat less meat. That's healthier for you too. This whole idea of 3 and 4 meats at one meal, you're killing yourself. And you're killing this planet. Because I just, right when Sister Ameena said, eat less meat, I was thinking of the same thing, and I looked this up. The U.S. could feed 800 million people with the grain that livestock eat. Cornell Ecologist advises animal sciences. That doesn't mean not eating meat, only eat grass-fed livestock. And Blossom Pure will ship it to your door. Blossom Pure, based in Toronto, Canada, but they have operations in the U.S. They will ship frozen, grass-fed, free-range, certified organic meat to your door. And then that grain, those soybeans and that corn and that corn and that corn. Some of you live here in southern Illinois. You know about the corn. You could drive all day and you're surrounded by a wall of corn. Then you go into Iowa and more corn. Right? Where's all that subsidized corn going? It's going to feed cows. So you can eat your In-N-Out burgers and your Burger King burgers and your Big Macs and your Whoppers and your halal guys burgers. Then the feces is a huge ecological problem in and of itself. How many of you saw Democracy Now!, where the pig farms, they put the feces in these lagoons and then spray it in the air? And then these African-American poor communities are suffering, and they've passed a law in North Carolina where they can't even appeal and sue the company. This is what's happening in this country. The feces, and finally the flatulence. Because cows are eating grain and pigs are eating grain, and chickens, and not eating just grass and natural food. The flatulence from animals is a greater source of greenhouse gases than all the cars on earth. From these massive farms. To grow soybeans is cutting down more rainforest than the Amazon and other regions to feed these cows. Deforestation, then, which has its own ecological consequences. Eat less meat, take cold showers, use water bottles, do everything Sister Ameena told you to do also, and collectively we can make a huge difference. Salam alaikum.
Takbir. And takbir for Sister Ameena. Allahu Akbar. And for all of you for coming to this important session. Now it is 8 o'clock. The session formally is over, but Maghrib kicks in at 8:30. So I think we have about 10 minutes, Muslim people time, right? So MPT, we have about 10 minutes to go. But before I go to the questions and answers, at least the ones that are written, I'll sort of try to summarize them. You have near you, and the volunteers will give out one of these session evaluation forms. We really need it to be filled out. Yeah, we're going to get to that. We really need it to be filled out. So please, the ISNA is very interested in your feedback on this session. It's session 3A. It's Water is Life. Please take the time to fill it out and make sure you pass it to the ISNA volunteer on the way out. Now, as just a couple of questions, I'm sort of going to read them in summary. Ones we received, and then show you, if the speakers have time afterwards, you can speak with them individually. And I'll ask the speakers just to sort of answer them as they feel appropriate. One has to do with vocation and career. Suppose you are in an industry that contributes towards pollution and waste. They're specifically speaking about the oil industry. Should you pull out? Should you continue to work? Plastic companies, et cetera. They made another question about both books. We will mention the names of both books again. There's a question concerning bottled water and how you might be able to utilize move away from bottled water to zero waste. So I'm not exactly sure of that question there. Here's another interesting question. The environmental impact of raising children from birth is hefty. Why not consider, and the world population is growing and there's a population crisis. What about the moral obligation to, instead of having your own children, to go through fostering and adopting of children as something to consider as well? And this is another question. What about those who say, yes, these are blessings from Allah, but we have been given them and we can spend them as we see fit? It is not haram to enjoy a good life. We can't make haram halal. And we can't make halal, something that is halal haram, because Allah tells us to enjoy things. So those are some of the questions, and I would bring the mic here maybe.
Well, we'll both answer.
Oh, that's fine, please.
Yeah, in terms of the job, I don't never encourage people to leave their jobs, but working in the oil industry doesn't prevent you from being an anti-oil activist from the inside, and also it doesn't prevent you from driving a hybrid car. It doesn't prevent you from having a water bottle. It doesn't prevent you from taking cold showers. It doesn't prevent you from buying recycled clothing. It doesn't prevent you from putting LED lights in your house, etc. So I would never encourage anyone to leave their job at this point, but until there are credible alternatives. So monitor the clean energy sector is growing, and a lot of jobs are shifting that way. That's why Tillerson, he was against pulling out of Paris. That's another story for another session. And in terms of the people that say, oh, God gave us these bounties, but he also gave us a social responsibility. So he just didn't give you the bounties, he gave it to us as a test. He gave it to us as a test. And as we said, he also contextualized these bounties in the context of our Sharia obligations, dictated by the maqasid, preserving life, preserving deen, religion, preserving life, preserving the intellect, preserving the family, and preserving private property. So if the environment goes to hell, all of those are threatened, including religion, because it's hard to be religion, to maintain a wholesome spiritual life in an ecological hellhole. And that's why we have so many distorted people coming out of these slums of Lagos and Karachi and Cairo and joining these insane groups, because these lives have been damaged by the surrounding. So to say, I'm going to get mine and then forget about your own children and what they're going to inherit, how can we say that's somehow, anyhow, how can we say that's Islamic? And how can we say that's reflective of the teachings of the Prophet, who was a mercy to all the worlds, sallallahu alaihi wasallam? No, it's just, that's a other question.
I'm a woman, right? Jazakallah khair, Imam Zaid. So just to add to that, does anyone know what this is? It's not a BlueBerry, it's not a BlackBerry, it's not a Samsung, it's not an iPhone. It is a 6-year-old phone. The amount of flack I get because I have this phone is quite remarkable, because 100 years ago, people had this odd notion that you kept things until they broke. They would buy their furniture, and when it broke, they'd actually repair it. They'd recover the cushions, and maybe even pass it on to their children. Today, we are taught to believe that every 2 years, for no good reason, we need to replace this. And out of sight is out of mind, because we have absolutely no idea what the consequences of millions of phones in some heap somewhere. I've actually heard they just send them to Nevada, where they leach into the ground. I can't say that on any authority. But I'm pretty sure there is some devastating consequences from all of the phones that we replace every couple of years just because, Steve Jobs decided that we all need the latest model. He got smart and moved on and realized there's another life. Kind of played a trick on the rest of us, right? Son of an immigrant. Anyway, I won't go into there. So, yes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I love to see your bounty on you, but it should not be on the backs of other people. And one of the things that neither of us talked about is the injustice. It's called ecological injustice. I happen to live in the hills in the East Bay of the San Francisco Bay Area. And within my eyesight is a Chevron refinery, which on occasion they will sound an alarm because there are toxic fumes that are being spewed out in the neighborhoods around that. Now, because I don't live in that neighborhood, I am not subject to that. Guess who gets to live next to the Chevron refinery? The poorest in society, who probably are using less oil and less gas. And this model is being duplicated across the world, where people in Bangladesh are being inundated with floods because people in first world countries who are using 25% or 40%, I'm not sure what the exact number is, of the world's resources are impacting the environment, and they are not paying the price. Somebody else is paying the price. So if you think that we are entitled to a lifestyle of luxury and I can do whatever I want because Allah gave it to me, you are not acknowledging what's happening on the other side. So you need to do a little bit more research about the impact of your iPhones, your cars, your diamonds. There are many people who do not buy diamonds like gold because people give up their lives for these. Ignorance is bliss, but we are khulafa. We are going to be held responsible because Allah put us, just because Allah put us in the United States of America does not excuse us from realizing that there are people across town or across the world who are living a very different lifestyle than we are and are paying the consequences. In terms of having less children, I mean, if you have a child in the United States, yeah, that child is going to be probably using 25 to 40% more of the world's resources versus if you had that child in Pakistan or Bangladesh. So maybe you could move home and have a child or have more children, or you could become more socially conscious. So as a Muslim, I find it very challenging to say, you should limit the number of children because that goes against, Quranic and prophetic ideas. But certainly, if you have those children, hand-me-downs is a great way to conserve. Making peanut butter sandwiches for lunch instead of, halal turkey. You can take steps to make sure that if you have those, additional children compared to your neighbors, that you are conserving the same amount of resources that you might not have used, and it's certainly doable. So I think we need to all press a reset button because we have been led to believe that more is better, that capitalism is the solution, and that, if God blessed us with our bounty and we're paying zakat, that's all we need to do. That is not what's happening. By the way, Amazon, just to say something in regard to what you said, they are the absolute worst when it comes to packaging. My daughter's kids just received an Eid present. The box was this big. Inside of it was a little box with a small thing in it. The way they treat their workers is horrendous. We need to really look at how some of these companies are run in terms of not just the environment, but in terms of the way they're paying people, the kind of abuses that they inflict on other people, and you can get a lot of things now online. The Story of Stuff actually is a cute little video as well, and she has a lot of, if you just get on her Facebook, she's always putting out cute little videos. There's also a video called Flow that talks about water, and there's a video that I cannot remember the name, but it talks about exactly what Imam Zaid said, that the impact of eating meat is even more than fossil fuels. So there's a lot of things you can get without, spending on packaging. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
Takbir, Allahu Akbar. Once again, thank you all for coming. Please, ISNA is very interested. We're very interested in your feedback on this session 3A, Water is Life. Please fill it out and make sure on the way out, you can leave it with me or you leave it with one of the volunteers that's by the door on the way out. We'll pick it up. The names of the books that Imam Zaid was speaking about were Strangers in Their Own Land by Arlie Rothschild, and The Story of Stuff. It is also in video format, and The Story of Water. And Imam Zaid reminded me, you can also purchase the ebook if you don't want to purchase the hard copy book through Amazon. That works as well. Assalamu alaikum, jazakallah khairan. Have a wonderful evening.